Hello, my name is Natalie. I created the bullet when I was in a dark place. It is a philosophical podcast that talks about human integrity and freedom. Coming from a dark place, I am not asking why the world is as it is, so as to make sense of it. I find the society we live in very questionable. I do not like how the modern Western worldview is considered synonymous with objective truth. So when I ask why the world is as it is, I am asking so as to undermine the foundations of a world that, in my opinion, needs to be unsettled and rethought. This is the second season of The Bullet, with the topic Bad Meditations. In this season, each episode will consist of 2 parts. The first part being a more artsy, bad meditation, and the second part being a short note on whatever topic was touched on in the meditation, so as to give it more of a context and realness. Now, without further ado, let's start. A short note on the topic of art. Even though I'm sure that the issues that I will describe are probably also relevant in other fields, I'm just talking about art as it is my personal field of expertise, both from being an artist myself and from supporting other artists in their development and moments of crisis. The most radical changes, extraordinary innovations, and biggest shifts in perspective will naturally and more likely be caused by the more sensitive and or incongruous people in regard to the current state of our society, because these are the people that experience the most pain and who therefore have the biggest motivation to try and inspire change. And many of these people will probably have had to find coping mechanisms for the pain they experience quite early, probably already in childhood. They have had to find places to hide, things to give them release, ways of processing and expressing their pain, and activities that helped replenishing them. And chances are that some of them found these things, that some of them felt a certain degree of freedom and ease and safety when engaging in things like play and art, blissfully losing themselves in fantasies while drawing or painting, diving into other worlds through reading books, watching movies, or playing video games, creating alternate realities through playing or writing, expressing emotion and power through singing and dancing, and so on. And then a good amount of these people, these children, later probably became artists, as they had been extensively trained in seeing and using the possibilities of these other worlds from a very early age, which is beautiful. But these sensitive, incongruous people who have developed their artistic skills under the severe pressure of a lot of pain or discomfort that had to be dealt with will probably, even if their life situation improved through growing up, still have to deal with the exact same pressure and the aftershocks of that painful birth of their art. People who grow up feeling and being treated like outsiders, who get threatened and experience a lot of boundary violation by means of their otherness, will naturally develop their identity around the overwhelming and most urgent need for acceptance, for safety, for being loved, respected, and being seen as good, simply because this is what they're lacking. And being a member of an interdependent species, one cannot afford to lack these things, as they are a direct and crucial threat to one's existence. So what we have here are rather desperate people, for a good reason, willing to give and sacrifice a lot in order to feel accepted. But, on the other side, these people have this incredible talent, these artistic skills, that can function as both, a tool for release, liberation, empowerment, as we've described before, and a way of trying to earn acceptance. So naturally there's a strong disposition for them to build a life that is almost entirely consumed by their art, as both their bridge to and shelter from that unfriendly outside world, that even though scary and alienating, is their home. Now what do you do when you live in a place like that? Move away? Try and adapt? Try and change the place? These are the very questions many artists struggle with through the course of their entire life. Addiction, or even suicide? Trying to prove one's worth at all costs? Trying to change the world? It's heavy and fucked up. The severity of these questions makes it so that many artists experience existential threat, existential crisis on a daily basis. Obviously, the goal would be to change the world, which is, or at least appears to be, a rather big task, especially when someone is already exhausted due to a lifestyle of consistent existential threat and a deep-rooted self-image of the world being against them. So most people, in an attempt to stay off of a slippery slope that could lead to self-hating or even suicidal thoughts, consciously or unconsciously choose a life of trying to prove their own worth at all costs. Now anything or anyone that touches and threatens their art, and therefore their shelter, their source of a sense of self-worth and empowerment, this precious thing they have dedicated their whole life to, truly hurts them. To say that they're not good enough, to question their talents, to confront them with the idea that they might not be able to do their art anymore, all of these can easily become manipulative tools. And in the art business, it is very common to work with this kind of manipulation. In order to make the most profit off of someone's work, in order to gain power over them, or in order to push them to extremes in trying to create extraordinary art. All of which are things that also artists do to other artists, passing on the hurt they have experienced themselves to the next generation of artists. Because this is just how art business works, get over it. And this is where art business can truly be a bleak word of pain, distrust and despair. And what actually holds the potential to inspire radical changes, extraordinary innovations and huge shifts in perspective, art, degenerates into a forced gimmick for entertainment's sake. It's a mean joke to say, well, this is just what an artist's life is like. They're just so dramatic and so sensitive, and it's part of their game to make everything so existential. The problem is not that this is just what artists are like, or that they need to toughen up or try harder. The problem starts with people growing up, feeling and being treated like outsiders, getting threatened, experiencing a lot of boundary violations by means of their quote-unquote otherness. And it aggravates with these people, for example, entering the art world, more precisely art business, where, by means of their dedication for art, their hope and savior, and by means of their low self-esteem, they experience abuse. I believe that many artists are held captive by the art business, by their collaborators, and by themselves, honestly, in a lifestyle of sacred suffering, as described before in this note, and touched on in the meditation on meaningless sensations. I have seen many people have their boundaries crossed, or even crossing their own boundaries, for the sake of their holy motive, their art, hoping to find release, liberation, empowerment, acceptance, not realizing that they're stuck in a situation where they're far away from really doing their art, but actually just barking yes to someone or something that keeps promising them salvation while benefiting from their despair. I want to see happy artists. Well, artists that don't get caught in situations like that, because they're too afraid to let go of the idea that their suffering was sacred and not just sad. Yes, we can learn a lot from bad situations. Bad situations, pain, and suffering can and will, like I said before, be the biggest motivators of powerful change. But to turn this into a lifestyle where we deliberately seek and celebrate suffering in hope of a bright future is just plain stupid. and abusive towards ourselves and everyone we try and convince of this quote-unquote method. And to do this is exactly how we're not gonna create the profound art that carries the potential of powerful change. To do this is how we're gonna spend our lives on suffering. Maybe, yes, inspiring people through our stubbornness that keeps us living a life that is fucking painful. But I don't think that this is the only thing that art can and should teach. So please, regardless of whether you are an artist yourself or not, don't fall for the idea that suffering will make you happy. If you're suffering right now, for whatever reason, please let it inspire you to make powerful decisions in the direction of less suffering. And I assure you that this is not just a selfish act, but that it will also lead to you unfolding more and more of your potential, contributing to society in a way where it becomes a better, safer, more beautiful place for everyone. Show solidarity to yourself and others. And find joy, real joy, in bringing about the most radical changes, extraordinary innovations, and biggest shifts in perspective that don't have to be gained through suffering. And I hope that you will have a good time ahead of you. If you enjoyed listening to this podcast and would like to support it, please check out my Patreon page. That is patreon.com/thebullet by Natalie Wendt. There you can find all information you might be interested in. And also feel free to leave me a comment or any personal thoughts you might have. They're all appreciated. I hope that the struggles you might be facing right now will turn into a bullet that will touch what needs to be touched, shatter what needs to be reassembled afresh, and implant the seed of change where freedom is needed. And I hope that you'll have a good week.